I think I'm the tallest so far. So, and I'm going to take you in a different direction. So I don't think we need that bench because after me it's Wikus. So let's start. I've noticed
ways in which it's traveled. For example, I've just been invited with the latest book on Loretta Ngobo to be part of a feminist open book day at the North.
I think I'm the tallest so far. So, and I'm going to take you in a different direction. So I don't think we need that bench because after me it's Wikus. So let's start. I've noticed, let me first introduce myself. My name is Hetta Pieterse. I'm from UNISA Press. I'm the commissioning editor. Happy to see you all here. And I've noticed we've got 103 participants online. What I'll do is I will first introduce Francis Pinter. And then I think I must introduce both speakers. Afterwards, take my laptop back to Susan so she can field for us the questions coming in. So we've had some interesting discussions just to link up with two previous speakers. Prof. Bawa has indicated for us that perhaps we should reconsider. We shouldn't take an existing, press. Maybe one should just freshly consider open access publishing. And this is where we're very lucky that the two presses available on the stage for us are quite newcomers. And yet, they're really showing us a thing or two. And then Prof. Barbara Boswell said, publishing is extremely political. So possibly when it comes to funding, this is where politics and economics do meet. So let's start then to say that Francis Pinter is the founder and executive director of Knowledge Unlatched, a not-for-profit company creating a global library consortium which enabled sustainable open access academic book publishing. She was also the CEO of Manchester University Press, and even early on in her career, she took a specific interest in developing sustainable business models for open access monographs. So previously, she was a publishing director at the Open Society Foundation, where she established EIFL, a leading library consortium and the Center for Publishing Development, working in all post-communist countries. Earlier, she also founded Pinter Publishers, that also owned Leicester University Press and launched the environmental studies imprint Belhaven Press. She did a PhD in international relations at University College London and a BA in political science again. Didn't I tell you that politics and economics do mix? She also studied at the London School of Economics. And then in February 2015, she was awarded an honorary doctorate of letters by Curtin University, exactly for her leadership in open access publishing. She currently is an associate member of Curtin University's Center for Culture and Technology under its new Models of Publishing Research program. So, Francis, let me first speak briefly about the other two, just to keep you in the room before you go off to lunch. And then this is how we'll do it. So let me quickly say something about African Minds. Over here we have Dr. Francois van Schalkwyk, the founder of African Mind, which is also a non-profit, not-for-profit, open access publisher based in Cape Town, South Africa. It publishes predominantly in the social sciences, and the authors are African academics and thinkers, as well as international academics with a close affinity with the continent. I think this is where he links up with Prof. Boswell's perception of, how political this business is of ours. Then this whole thinking of the broadest possible dissemination of a list rather than the focus on sales or profitability. African Minds is exactly doing. Trustees were also elected based on their abiding belief in the values of the organization, particularly open access to knowledge about and from the continent. And their staff base is absolutely streamlined. I think that's an understatement, Francois. as is the editorial board. And I think from a large press, I'm very envious of that agility that your press definitely has. So African Minds, therefore, is not a traditional commercial publisher. What I may add is that we did for this panel also invite a commercial publisher who declined to participate. So enough said. Their emphasis is less than African Minds, their emphasis is less on the commercial viability of publications than on fostering access, openness, and debate in the pursuit of growing and deepening of African knowledge base. See again the politics coming in. I noted when I did my homework for this, I noted that African Minds since last year became part of the scholar-led, a consortium, a scholar-led, not-for-profit open access book publishers that was formed in 2018. And I think you were part of an online conference also recently. I listened to that. Very interesting bunch of people. I think a couple of rebels in there. Mattering Press, Meson Press, Open Book Publishers, Punctum Books, not punk, but almost maybe, I don't know, African Minds and MediaStudies.press. And their website says, collectively, we are seeking to develop powerful, practical ways for small-scale, scholar-led open access presses to grow and flourish in a publishing landscape that is changing rapidly. So I'm sure Francois can fill us in a little bit about that. And then last but not least, possibly the youngest publisher in the room, but really casting others in the shade. So I wouldn't say I'm envious, but I'm in admiration of what you guys have done so far. UJ Press was established in October 2020 under the auspices of the UJ Library. The press started publishing open access journals on the Open Journal system. And in October 2021, it started with Open Monograph Press. I can't believe you did so much. Although he's saying he's still busy at it, we should watch this space. So UJ Press titles are available from 13 platforms and distributors, which is this ensures an excellent reach. And even as a new press, UJ Press purchased some 98 scholarly backlist titles. So you would think it's a new press, so there's no backlist, but luckily he's got the strategy sorted out. So they sell and distribute, and they ensure that there's good reach, impact, and citation of these titles by ensuring that there's rich metadata, there's good chapter level information, especially. That's quite a new movement, I think, for the books. ORCID and DOIs are available in Onyx 3.0 format and to a range of channels. That's vital. I think he said a select number of titles were also made available in open access format. You better speak about that, please. And then at the moment, because they're still developing, he says he's going to tell us a bit about the memberships that they're busy setting up. I see also that they make the sale of their print copies available via Amazon, Ingram Lightning Source, and they're in the process of also making it print on demand, enabling full print fulfillment, because of course with books, many people still prefer the print copies and through Takealot. And I'd like to say that this is a distinguishing feature of the press, apart from everything else that they got to get done in a very short space of time. And then of course the open access journals, the PDFs are directly accessible. So I am now returning to Frances Pinter, and the title of her talk, which you can almost see on the screen there, is Open Access Monograph Publishing, Where's the Money and What Are the New Models?
Thank you very much. And I am now, you see me trying to get my slides up. I'm now doing it for real. So bear with me. Can you see that now? I hope you can see that and hear me. I've been in the world of open access publishing for an awfully long time. And it's a real delight to be here with you today, because I like to think about this in terms of where is the money, and then what are the new models and how we can employ the money that there is to make monographs open access. So I start with who pays for closed monographs now? Well, we know it's to institutional libraries, primarily in the North. We know that research funders have sometimes subsidized closed monographs in the print format, in the old print format, sometimes universities too. And we know that very few individuals buy monographs. But now in the open access world, who is paying for monographs? Well, the cavalcade is being led by research funders who are mandating that the research that they fund goes open access. There are also pots of money in institutions, either centrally or at the department level, and this is pretty ad hoc and difficult to access. And then there are library budgets, of which I'll talk a bit some more further on. Some of the funders that have been leading the way in mandating open access are these, and there are many others. And some of the main ones came together under something called Plan S, which I suspect you're all familiar with. These are 17 national funders in the North, primarily in Europe, 5 charitable and international funders, and the EU and European Research Council. This represents an awful lot of research money and therefore an awful lot of publications that are going open access. But I suspect you're familiar with all this through the APC route, but now the BPC route is coming into play as these organizations are mandating that books too go open access. And they don't always have the money or provide the money to go open access. So we need business models that aren't just dependent on these funders, and we need books that funding for books that aren't coming just out of funded research projects, especially in the humanities and social sciences. So we're looking for business models. And basically there are 2 types, the book processing charge model and the non-book processing charge model. And here are a couple of examples. Tome is a model that has been experimented with in the United States, where there's a collective of universities where at the senior level, funding is offered to early career scholars within the participating universities. Another approach has been Lever Press, and this is where a number of liberal arts colleges have come together to form a new press to publish open access, and it's the universities that provide the funding. And then the poster child for a single university press that is completely open access, born digital, born open, is the well-known UCL press. But this is primarily for authors coming from University College London. And of course, it works with a big institution with a big budget. And then there are the numerous scholar-led presses, which are much smaller, but do depend on the funding coming from their institutions. Now, I have at the very end of the slide put the links to all the acronyms and presses that I'm talking about. But to carry on with the business models that are based on BPC, some of the newer ones are Cambridge University Press, their flip to open model. This is where they're piloting now 25 books where they say once they reach the threshold for each title, they reach a threshold that covers their publishing costs, they will make the book open. So obviously they're relying on sufficient sales to institutions and then to go to open access. Springer is trying a model that is similar to the journal transformative deals, which I suspect everybody is familiar with. But the only way to do this is for a big publisher to work with a very big collective of libraries. So the pilot is with the California Digital Library, representing 10 large universities, and it's a read and publish type deal. We'll see where that goes. I mentioned Knowledge Unlatched because it's effectively a marketplace for various initiatives that are both BPC and non-BPC based. Now, the newest model on the block, or set of models, are attempts to get around the BPC model, which is so restrictive to those authors that have the money to pay for a BPC from whatever source they might find it, to something that is less discriminatory. And the MIT have set up a program called Direct to Open. And this model is, it's an interesting one. It's been supported initially by the Arcadia Foundation. And here, basically, it's a kind of subscribe to open model. So libraries will subscribe to MIT and this particular program in exchange for access to the backlist. And the money that is collected in this way will go directly to funding the front list publication costs to go open access. And MIT have just announced that they have reached the threshold that they were aiming at to make all of their 2022 publications open access. Michigan has a similar model called Fund to Mission, but it's slightly different where the thresholds are. It's slightly different because it has a lot of funding from its institution backing this model. CU Press, the one that I'm associated with at the moment, and Liverpool University Press are trialing a model called Opening the Future, which is supported by the COPIN project, which is UKRI and Arcadia funded to kickstart the model. It does have a sustainability aspect to it, which we're hoping to reach. And now I'm going to go into a bit more detail on the Opening the Future model, just because I know it very well because I'm working with it. And I think it has some really good potential for smaller publishers, like the one I work for. So the idea behind this model is that the library subscribes to a backlist package of non-OA books. So this backlist that's closed, and library gets a subscription to a package at a discounted price. And then these books are available to the members. These books also continue to be sold elsewhere at the normal price. Publishers then use the subscription funding to make new books open access. And as we grow in membership, we can make more and more books open access. So the specific features of this, as applied to the CU Press, which is trying to make 25 monographs open access a year, is as follows. The initial subscription to the backlist is a commitment for 3 years. So libraries are asked to subscribe for 3 years. After 3 years, the libraries own the backlist package in perpetuity. In our case, we offer a choice of 4 packages with 50 books in each of them. Remember, these numbers are simply pertaining to the CU Press. Liverpool has slightly different numbers as it is applying the model to at a series level and not at a full monograph output level. Libraries can also support the OA front list without actually subscribing. And the tiered pricing is between 500 euros and 1,200 euros per annum. The backlist is hosted by Muse, and they provide all the relevant metadata. The sales and invoicing is managed through Lyrasis, JISC, and Knowledge Unlatched, depending on which part of the world the library is located in. And as I said, we're aiming to raise sufficient funding for 25 frontlist titles per annum. We're 1 year into the marketing and selling of this, and we're nearly halfway there in raising the money. So we've already been able to make books open access because it's books go open access as soon as we have sufficient funding. Now, the benefits of a non-BPC model is that it doesn't discriminate against authors without BPC funding. And this is hugely important for university presses and mission-driven presses, which is what I would call the smaller commercial presses that don't make a profit, but are really trying to make a difference with their publications and their publishing offerings. And a non-BPC model also provides certainty of cash flow to publishers, which is hugely beneficial, as we all know. And it draws from funding that's already there in the library budgets. So what we're trying to do is redirect the budgets that libraries have and apply them to paying for going open access instead of buying books for their closed collections. And in doing so, and I don't have time to go through this now, we can actually demonstrate that there are cost savings even there in the distribution of the content. It's actually cheaper to give it away than it is to try and sell one by one each individual copy or digital file. Another advantage is that it concentrates on it uncouples from the concept of paying per title. But it does require a commitment to a press or a group of presses and a bit of confidence that the quality of the output will be sufficient and acceptable. So here's the conclusion that I draw from nearly 20 years of working in the open access space. We probably need globally BPC models and non-BPC models to work together in tandem. There are pilot projects that are work in progress, a few are in stage 2, and we need to engage with all of these projects, see which elements of them work, which don't work, and try and make it attractive to all of the stakeholders. OA does have the potential to save on costs, but must be made attractive to those who pay. And the kinds of models I've been talking about, the non-BPC models, rely to a large extent on libraries. And so my final question is, would a South African or even a Pan-African collective of publishers working together be able to benefit from a kind of opening the future non-BPC model that I've outlined here? That's not for me to answer. It's, I hope, something that you'll consider. And if you do it even better than the people before you. So thank you very much. And I look forward to questions and discussion. And here are the links. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Let's introduce Wikus. Are you going to sit down? Are you coming over this way, the tall man?
Hetta, thank you very much for the introduction. I appreciate it. And to the physical and our virtual audience, thank you so much for joining this session. I look forward to sharing a bit about UJ Press with you. As Hetta mentioned, we're the youngest press in South Africa. And in a short time, we really accomplished a lot. So if African Minds is streamlined, we are aerodynamic. I hit the ground running. So I joined in October 2021. And fortunately, we could start with a few journals. We had 10 journals on our open journal system, all open access journals. And since we've added 5 new journals on our platform, and we're very excited to see these journals grow and to get them onto more platforms, to have them accessible, and to be able to measure the impact of these journals. So we're very proud to have these international journals flying and gaining in popularity as well. So our journals, some of them are published in gold open access and some of them diamond open access. So some charge APCs and some don't. And that's the same with our book publishing program. Some of our books are published in diamond open access and some in gold open access. And we plan to publish all of our scholarly publishing outputs as open access publications. As Hetta also mentioned, we make sure that our books are on all of the scholarly platforms, making sure that the accessibility to it is optimal and that it has international impact. And regarding our print-on-demand capabilities, we make sure that the books are available in print and electronic format so that people can access it in the format that they'd want to read it. Another innovation that we're working on is XML format, where automatic translations are made available to people that can then access the title in any language that they want. It also opens it up to data mining, opening up new research possibilities for that content. So, and I also have to stress the importance of institutional support. I'm very thankful and fortunate that UJ really supports the press and is a champion for the press. So we got a lot of support from them, and I'm so glad Dr. Leruli is here as well from the research office. And it does show that UJ supports our researchers and also the press. And being in the library is also a very good advantage because we're in direct contact with the researchers at the inception of their research projects. Our library is also key in supporting researchers, paying APCs, and supporting them in the whole research process in terms of training, workshops, and equipping them to give 100% wonderful research outputs. So you might also be aware of UJ's push towards 4IR, and they're also implementing it in the press. So we're working on 3D elements, virtual reality elements, and making sure that all of our content can be data mined. We're also implementing blockchain into our peer review processes and copyright issuing. And we're very excited to see where the press is going. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Wikus. I'm sure there might be some more questions afterwards. And now it's the turn of Francois van Schalkwyk, African Minds.
Thank you, Hetta, and it's afternoon already. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm new to glasses, so my glasses are going to be moving up and down as I look at my notes and as I look up. It's all quite confusing to me. And I don't know if you noticed, but all of us on stage are left-handed. So this is the rise of the left, as you can see, happening right in front of you. I don't know what you take away from that in terms of publishing, but I don't know what Francis, are you left-handed? Can she hear us? We'll have to find out. Okay,
I can hear you, and I'm ambidextrous.
Okay, it's good enough. That's good enough. Great. So I haven't prepared anything. I thought I'd always, it's always nice to go last because you can respond to everyone else. But there's one general point that I wanted to make, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about African Minds. The point that I wanted to make is that we've been talking a lot about models. There's a lot of talk about business models. And we have to remind ourselves that models try and achieve something. And we have to try and think about what is it that we're trying to achieve. So models are the solution to the problem we're trying to solve. But sometimes I think we lose sight of what the problem is. And so commercial models are not necessarily inherently bad models, or open access models aren't necessarily good models. I mean, we've seen with open access, large commercial publishers taking over open access. There's a lot of concern about the future of open access because of that. So it's a question of what we're trying to achieve and how we design the models to achieve that. I think most of us that are presenting here are working in the same direction, but we often don't stop to think and ask ourselves what it is that we're trying to do. So what I'm going to do is tell one or two short stories. And I only thought about one today when I saw Wikus again. So see if they kind of give you a sense of some of the values that we are trying to adhere to as African Minds. And then I will talk about the model because that's what Hetta told me I must talk about. So first story was, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, where there was a book launch, several book launches that were being co-hosted at Lanzerac in Stellenbosch. And for those of you that have worked as publishers, you know this, you always have to arrive earlier to the book launch. You have to make sure you remember to pack the tablecloth, and do you even have a table? There are lots of boxes of books that you've got to carry, and did you bring the trolley? And so it's a lot of work that goes on. So at this particular launch was myself from African Minds, and Wikus was there from Sun Media. And I think he had some colleagues with him. And we all set up. And there's a lot of work and a lot of effort. And then everyone, during drinks and things came around and took a look at the books. And Wikus had his credit card machine and was hoping to scan as many, sell as many books as he could. And I was just handing books out, saying, you want a book? How much? No, you can have a book. It's fine. It's been paid for. What? No, this can't be right. No, you take a book. By the end of the evening, my table was empty. And poor old Wikus had to pack up books, get the trolley, fold up the tablecloth, and lug the books back. That's a value. We wanted books in people's hands at that event. It was a key meeting of important scholars in a particular area. Those books had been paid for already. We didn't have to sell them. We could have double dipped, I think is the expression, but we just handed out the books because it was important that the people that left there had a copy of the book. Whether they read it or not, of course, we don't know, but at least they left with a copy. So that's one story. The second story is I've been advocating for a long time to try and co-publish in an open access world. Not to a lot of people, that doesn't make sense, because in the old model, you carve up territories and each one sells in their territory and you make your money in your territory and you respect each other's rights. Open access doesn't make sense because it's networked. Everything's available to anyone, anywhere. So why would you co-publish? My argument was, well, because we all have access to different networks. So I have my mailing list and my contacts and my authors, and so I can reach them. But if you publish with me, you can reach other people. And so we broaden the access of that title. And so it does make sense, to my mind at least, to co-publish. So the first time I tried this was with a big German publisher, and it didn't work. I had a very good relationship with the commissioning editor. It was a book, happened to be on classics. We got along very well. Everything made sense. The author even raised 30,000 euros in funding for this book, which is no small amount in open access. But as soon as it went to sales, marketing, and legal, things went sour very quickly. We still published the book, but of course, 30,000 euros went to the German publisher. We got nothing. And then we were asked, how many books would we like to buy? As though we are markets. So we were treated as a market, not as a partner in that deal. And it just showed a clash of values. We weren't really on the same page. Maybe at the copy editor, I'm not the copy editor, the commissioning editor and I were on the same page. But after that, it was big machine, little player down in Africa. So after that, I've been looking around and talking to people, and we've been, Hetta mentioned this, we've joined this organization called Scholar-Led, all small publishers, all scholar-led. We all work at universities. We're all familiar with the scholarly environment. We share scholarly values. We, if you know about Merton's norms, those 4 norms guide a lot of what we do, whether it's in publishing or whether it's in our academic pursuits. None of us want to be big. We don't want to scale. When people say to us, how are you going to scale? We don't want to. We want to remain small and work together. That's our ambition. So it's a different approach to achieving maybe the same end. One thing that's been quite interesting joining this group is we do charge book processing fees or BPCs, not to all publishers, but to some. So we're kind of a hybrid model, very similar to what Wikus described at UJ. But most of the scholar-led don't charge BPCs. They have different ways of raising income. And I mean, as Francis said, you need to make money somehow to fund the operations. It can't be completely for free. So we've been feeling a little bit on the outside. So I'll just park that for now. Then at a OASPA seminar, sorry, OASPA is the Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association. I think that's the seminar that you joined, Hetta. I also presented, and a lot of other open access publishers presented, which is fitting given that it was OASPA. But a lot of the commercial publishers started saying, hey, but we're feeling like we demons, we're evil. And the point was, they're not all of them. Some of them are, but so are some open access publishers. It's not about whether you're open access or not open access. It's again about those values and the way that you run your publishing business that matters. So back to the model. African Minds is fully open access, there are no exceptions, all CC BY. One or two exceptions where when we do co-publish with commercial publishers, they might insist on a NC, which means non-commercial license, and we will entertain that, but it's not ideal for us. As I said, it's hybrid in the sense that some books are funded by the publisher itself. So there's a cross-subsidization that happens. And there was talk about textbooks this morning, which is very interesting to me because that creates that possibility for cross-subsidization. But sometimes it's cross-subsidization from wealthy Norwegian universities that have very generous budgets. And they're supportive of the fact that we might use some of that money for other publications. So it's a hybrid model in that sense. It's print and open access because, as the point was made earlier, people still want books. Academics want books on their shelves. They want to see a spine. Some of them are on a just-in-time system, so they sit at overseas printers, and as orders are generated, a copy is printed. Locally, that's a little bit more difficult. I want to ask Wikus about the espresso machine and whether it's still alive. Here we do what I call micro printing, so 20, 30 copies. The books never go out of print, but we have small stock holdings. But what's also important is that it's so context dependent. And I mean, no criticism what Francis has presented, but when she presented the three benefits of non-BPCs, I would say all of those apply to us too as BPCs, but that's because of our context. It's because of DHET and the subsidy scheme that we can do this. It's not that we rely on institutions for money or from funders necessarily, but from the academics themselves who have research funds. They have research accounts that they can draw on to publish. So that's very much unique to our context. It's not something that works in the UK necessarily or in the US. Then their context is different. So a lot of the scholar-led publishers that we work with rely on libraries for sales. We couldn't survive on library sales in South Africa. It would be impossible, but they can. So I think it is a horses for courses approach that one has to take. There's no universal model. You need to understand the local dynamics. But at the same time, and Hetta also asked me to speak about this, it's not getting lost in the local. You can network and team up with publishers overseas to increase the exposure of your titles. And there is an appetite for that. I mean, I've seen that. Publishers overseas seem far more likely or willing to talk to us in the last 3 or 4 years than they were previously. I struggled to get people to engage with us. Now they're approaching us. They want to talk to us. They're interested in content from Africa. So there's an opportunity there to be more global, even though the focus in terms of content might be more local. So in conclusion, it's really that I want to advocate for a more values-driven approach, regardless of whether you're commercial or non-commercial, open access or non-open access. And that also means a closer relationship with the academy, between the publishers and the academy. And that's ultimately where it all started. Now, I'm still looking for that book, and I wish I had time and money to do this research, but how in the 1800s this relationship developed between publishers and the academies. The academies were doing all the work, and at some point they couldn't anymore. The volumes grew too big as science became more public, and they started to trust publishers. Trust, and that's what it was built on. Nature didn't make a profit for, I think, until the early 1900s. It was making losses, but it worked on a trust basis, and it's rekindling or rebuilding that trust between publishers and scholars that I think is really important, regardless of the model that you make work in your own particular context. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see our time is running short and I'm sure you're all hungry. I'm going to ask Susanna if there are any questions, and then we can do a bit of a panel.
Thank you, Chair. So there's a very interesting remark from Sandy Shepherd, which you all know in this community, especially. She says she's left-handed. So there you go. Another one to your board of left-handees. But she's asking a very interesting question, which I think we have not thought about and did not touch upon in setting up this meeting today. She's saying, in the open access model, gold or diamond, what is the role of a copyright collections agency like Delro? Or does this mean no copyright protection? So that's the question. Thank you.
Okay, I want to resist the, oh, there's another question from the floor. Thank you. We'll hold on to that question. And let me ask, Asha, your question.
Okay, thank you. Thanks everyone for your very interesting presentation. It's really nice to just learn more about what your presses are doing. I did want to ask Francois something about the co-publications on open access. I find that, yeah, just very interesting model. So, I mean, it's very technical and nitty-gritty questions. I mean, are they asking you to pay like file fees and royalty advances? And is it the same with the bigger, commercial open access publisher, and the same with the scholar-led one? And then are you, in the local context, how do you develop your marketing and dissemination strategy? And then are you also printing print copies for the free distribution? Thanks.
Any more questions? There's Andrew.
Thank you, Hetta, and thank you to the panelists. I just wanted the last comment of Francois was really good. Thank you. Just about tying together the academy and its activities and the work of publishers. And if you had any ideas, or the panel really have any ideas about how that could be done practically, and how we can feed that information back. I mean, the question that you asked earlier about the list of accredited journals, for instance, or the list of accredited titles. I mean, that sort of information, I think, is valuable to flow back and forth between. We guarantee that it's peer reviewed, and then we know whether that's been successful or not. And I think this also relates to usage and to the bibliometrics that develop from this. So perhaps that's a practical conversation that we could be having with the academy, DHET mediated or USAF, to say that this is the value of it. Yeah, something for us to think about.
Just one comment to add before we begin the panel discussion. I'd love to just mention Pretoria University Law Press, of course. You know, in terms of mission-driven publishers, when you spoke about handing out books, Francois, of course, this is what they do. They're very strict on not making any profit. They have an impressive list, and their model is also, but very purist, if we can put it this way. Okay, so let's see how we can get Francis in first. And I'd like to give, Francis, I'd like to give you an opportunity to expand a bit on, you were making a certain suggestion around a model that could work in South Africa. Do you want to say a little bit more? And the other panelists, they haven't really had a chance to comment on that. I wonder how we'll do with a microphone over here, but let's first ask Francis to comment.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks. Yes, excellent.
Okay. Well, the way I would see it, the first step is to find the university presses or mission-driven presses that would be interested in doing this, and to contact the COPIM group, which is this Arcadia project that supports these smaller presses that are going open access. And and also talk to the CU Press and Liverpool University Press and see how they've built this model and what the obstacles have been, what's been easy. It's been basically relying on how well you describe the model and promote the model to the libraries. It's not a difficult model, although it has taken some time to get people to understand that it's a different model, which is, well, that's always been the case with new models. But it's something that I think could bring the money that's in the northern library budgets into the African publishing community to pay for these books that they really want and find it quite difficult to actually access and obtain in their closed forms as you sell those books globally right now. If I may, I also want to comment on Francois's co-publication idea. I think this is a wonderful idea. I want to explore with you how to do it. I think you've just, you've had an unpleasant experience with a German publisher, but I can see this working because my university press is looking to expand its remit from just publishing books on issues around Central and Eastern Europe and the former communist countries to dealing with the problems of transition, of democratization, of all the things that you've got an enormous amount of experience with. And so, talk to me and we'll see if we can make this work.
Excellent. Thanks. Thanks, Thanks, Francis. We're getting ready to answer that question, to sorting out.
So, I think I'm going to start with Roshan's question, if that's okay, because it's really practical and I can kind of illustrate using an example, and it responds a little bit also to your comment, Francis. So we did have a bad experience, but we're currently having a good experience. So, I'm hoping that sets a trajectory, and I'll certainly be in touch with you to see how we can explore that. So I'm going to give you a practical example. It just happens to be with Liverpool University Press. They approached us about the possibility of working together. Again, it was in classics, an area that we haven't really worked, but I was always keen to move more into the arts in that side of things. So it was an opportunity because Liverpool has something called the Liverpool list, which is very strong in classics. So I thought this is a good way to get exposure. The way it works is that they will print for the EU and US, the world markets. We will print locally. We have the funding from Stanford University as it happens. And so we will produce here and they comment on the production process. So, we design covers, we share it, we discuss it, text design, because it has to fit in with their series too. We're fairly flexible. We're not that strict about, it must look good, but it doesn't have to look like 10 other books. So it's really been really straightforward. No complications. There's a contract in place, but it didn't take long to draft because it's fairly clear who's doing what. But also I think it helps that we're flexible. And I think that's the comment that Wikus made. Some publishers might say, we can't give away the print rights for those territories. We want to. I don't care who prints it. As long as it gets printed and people can get the book, then we've achieved our mission. And let's not kid ourselves. We're not going to make thousands and thousands of dollars on print sales in the US and the UK. It's not about the money. It's about getting the book to the right people. So that's the model. Does that kind of make sense? And it's obviously open access. They can put it wherever they want. We can put it wherever we want. Non-exclusive. So there's a joint open access part, and then the print is still kind of divided on sort of old lines, if you want to put it that way. Then just to respond to Francis's comment about the various models with libraries, I would like just to add to this, also from the Copen project, there's something called the Open Books Collective. It's purely for open access publishers. And this shows you how counterintuitive things can be. So the idea here is that open access publishers will put all their open access titles on a platform, and libraries will pay for collections on that platform. Now you'd think, well, why? They can just go and download all the books for free. Well, they can, but they're still prepared to support open access in principle rather than in terms of the access to the content. So actually what they're doing is supporting the publishers in an indirect way, using the budgets that are available to them. And we already joined up with that project. It hasn't been launched yet, but it hopefully later this year. And I want to add that what's important for us there, and it links to something that Francis said, is that if it works, and of course we don't know, it's an experiment to some extent. If it works, it can generate money for African minds through libraries that will allow us then not to charge all the authors. So we can, in theory, start to transition away from BPCs towards a fully diamond model, but it depends on the success of the model, as it were. And the one issue is that quite a few of these models out there, and you kind of have to decide which one to go for and which one to try, and that can be a little bit overwhelming. I know Kian wants to say something about copyright. Our stance is very simple. It doesn't matter. You know, we just carry on. So
No,
Kian's
but
got a very different view.
I think we're almost touching on the question that came from Sandy.
Sandy's question.
And
Say something,
Wikus can complete, and as far as I know, one uses a set of one of the Creative Commons licenses. And let me ask Wikus if you want to also comment on that, and maybe on Francis' suggestion for a model.
Yeah, like Francois said, it's very much a hybrid model. So there is flexibility within the model, and with open access, you have to be open, literally. And one other thing, you asked about the book espresso machine. So UJ Press was almost the owner of an espresso book machine, because there was an espresso book machine standing in the library, in UJ Library, for years, underutilized. And I really considered it, but then eventually I decided I'm a publisher and not a printer. So I'm using another print supplier to do printing for me. And they print one copy, they supply to Take a Lock. It's on the same basis as Ingram Lightning Source is working. They will also be working with Amazon once Amazon comes in. So yeah. Kian, over to you.
Okay, I think all these models are really interesting, and I think that they are the way that publishing is going to go. So to come back to the question from Sandy, not all authors are employed. Many authors actually try to earn a living through writing. And so, you said I'm on the opposite side to some extent, possibly. I think academics are very privileged in that they get salaries. In South Africa, they're more privileged because they get, for accredited publications, DHET sponsorship, which comes from the taxpayer, which they don't seem to understand. If they did realize it came from the taxpayer, they might spend the money more effectively on building capacity within their research institutions. But collecting agencies like Delro still service the legacy publishers where materials are protected by copyright, and where they may be behind paywalls. But of course, the accusation is that these are too expensive, but they're not necessarily for universities, because universities buy bouquets of subscriptions to journals, and that means that the cost is brought down dramatically. And for work that is still copyrighted and that is still part of the legacy publisher, Delro licenses course packs for university use, which brings down the cost of course pack to 150 Rand per course where those are used, rather than having to pay 1,000 Rand for a book in which you might read one chapter. So it's a kind of economy of scale that works for students and lecturers in universities, which has been forgotten in the attack on the big five publishers. These are other issues that need to be resolved in other points of view, in other sectors. So basically, open access items, such as being discussed from the floor here, may well be free to read, but not all publishers are going to let them be free for downloading or for reproduction to classes or for other purposes. So permissions might still be required. Royalties may still flow to public publishers and the authors through the collecting agencies, even in the open access operation. So there are various different models, different pricing systems. And I found a book that I had edited from Critical Arts Back Issues was published just a couple of days ago. And I went into the internet and I found that I can read parts of the book, but I can't read the whole book. So if I want to read the whole book, then I have to, as a reader, not myself, I would have to pay some royalties to get that, to download the chapters that are blank pages. But certainly the introduction is there. So if you want, different models, and we must realize that if we don't find publishers don't find ways of sustaining themselves financially, they go out of business, and then we go out of business. Academics go out of business. So it's all very well screaming and yelling about the big publishers and the profits that they make. Do we also complain about Microsoft and the software companies and the licenses that we have to pay and the fact we have to upgrade our computers every 2 years? That's where the prices, that's where the costs are in university budgets. Okay, the big publishers are not. Why is it that authors have to make everything free, but the ink suppliers, the paper suppliers, the photostat suppliers, the printing suppliers, the software suppliers are not questioned about how they price their products for universities. So let's start, if we're going to be critical of one sector, let's be critical of them all and get governments to negotiate, across the board with these big companies, big tech especially, to come up with something that works for everybody. So I think that the multiple questions, it's very complicated. This is not a lawyer's perspective. I found that working with copyright lawyers has been a fascinating experience, and I don't understand a word of what they write. But I'm learning, and we all need to learn, because we've all got to cope in this IP-led world that is the fourth industrial revolution. We think about it as technology, but in fact, it's content. And so if we're going to give away our content to the big tech companies without any licensing protections, like, we're going to give content to Google, but we're going to object to Taylor and Francis, we need to think about, the consequences of the fishing industry, which is big tech, and the protection industry in both senses of the term, which is the big publishers. The small publishers in South Africa operating under very different circumstances. And the problem is that the anti-copyright, the pro-copyright bill lobby don't make a distinction between the massive big international companies, including big tech like Google, and the small publishers in South Africa, largely locally owned, trying to survive in an environment which is running away from them, and which their university administrations, with the exception of the University of Johannesburg and maybe one or two else, are not actually getting to grips with. So the complexities are tremendous. And I think what is of value in this forum is that we do have youngsters and young presses represented on the stage, plus, of course, the granddaddy of them all, to help us negotiate these new contexts which are moving at such speed that we're not, that budgeting categories are not actually catching up with them as yet. So I think that's, this is one of the objectives of the forum, is to do exactly what Professor Bawa asked this morning, was to have a national response to local situations which may differ university by university, and copyright shouldn't be lost in that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we should wrap up in terms of time. What I'll ask is that each one of you have a closing statement. Francis, you've heard the complexities around also the author's right to earn an income from their work. The copyright, it's not the same on your side, but can I ask you for a closing statement, and then the other two? Wikus.
Well, I'm not as, obviously, I come to this unfamiliar with the details of the environment that you're operating in, although I've been following some of the debates over the years, and I see the opportunities, which are great. I also acknowledge the complexities, which are different to the North, but as on the copyright issues, I agree that one needs to look at different copyright solutions to different types of books. And the particular type of books that I've been talking about are monographs. Of course, the boundaries aren't all that clear. They're somewhat porous because monographs can move over to being crossover books if enough readers actually find that they're interested in it. But it's just great to hear this thinking, and I'm taking away some ideas as well that I would love to see applied in the part of the world that I work in. Thank you.
Thanks, Wikus. Francois, go for it.
So in the interests of openness and extreme generosity, Andrew, please go ahead.
Thank you, Francois. I just very quick, I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Just a quick, I wanted to follow up on what Kian said on this, and I kind of implied it in my comment, but I was obviously much too polite about it. So just to say that I think even working with things like Creative Commons licenses and things like that are premised on there being a copyright regime in place. And I think we do have to care about it. And I think there are obvious threats, some of which Kian has raised. But for us as publishers, and I think for the Academy as well, removing, simply producing a work and making it publicly available, it doesn't end there. Not for the Academy, not for the publisher. And in order to maintain that kind of control or the use of it and the measurement of it, if it is going to have a value that goes beyond simply producing an object, these things need to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. My last word is just that each press has different commercial, institutional, and ideological considerations that they have to take into consideration in their whole process. But in the end, they have to ensure that they do what's best for the publication as well as for the research to make sure that it's available, accessible, and that it has impact.
Okay, I think we leave you with that food for thought. I think we've opened many aspects that we haven't finally solved, but this is part of the complexity of the debate. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. I was told to say that lunch is in the amber room because it's too chilly outside. So hope you can join us, and those at home, sorry about that. You better be here next time. Oh, are you all right?